Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And I'm Alan Singer.
Dr. Alan Singer, educator, historian, is our resident expert on Media Watch for things historical and otherwise. We're doing this Wednesday
the 20th.
20th, yes. Wednesday, December 20th. Brought to you by the good graces of EVT Educational Productions. It will show up on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, probably next Monday, maybe, and definitely on.
And if it does show up on Monday, for those who celebrated, Merry Christmas.
That'll be Christmas Day. And actually, this will be the last show of Media Watch for the year 2023. Can you believe that? Another year has zipped by. And yeah, Zoom. And breaking news as of yesterday, I think it was yesterday or early today. I think it was yesterday when the Colorado Supreme Court overruled a lower court ruling about Donald Trump. Bob, what did the Supreme Court say?
Yes, the Colorado Supreme Court basically tossed Donald Trump off the Republican primary ballot in Colorado based on the fact that he led an insurrection. And according to the 14th Amendment, those who are involved in an insurrection cannot be eligible to run for office. That overturned a lower court decision that, yes, said that he had been involved in an insurrection, but argued that somehow the president wasn't covered by that element of the Constitution because for a reason I can't decipher. The Supreme Court said, yes, he's covered, and no, he's not on the ballot, but it's being appealed at this moment to the Supreme Court. So stay tuned, folks.
The U.S. Supreme Court. They
Yes.
will appeal.
Yes.
So another one of the Donald Trump legal wrangles that will fall on the doorstep of the U.S. Supreme Court. Well, interestingly enough, there was another Trump-related ruling, and I say Trump-related because it actually had to do with that RICO indictment in Georgia, correct, Bob or Ray? Which one of you guys know about that? Fannie Willis, Mark Meadows was trying to say he was not covered by local state stuff. What was the ruling?
Well, the ruling was that he was wrong, number one, that he is liable. His claim was that he was exempt because he was a federal employee. The court ruled that his actions in the January 6th matter were not part of his federal duties. So he is liable for that. And what I found interesting about that is the deciding judge, the appellate judge, William Pryor, is extremely right-wing. He's a very conservative judge, and he ruled against, he had the deciding vote. He ruled against Meadows in this matter. Okay. So Meadows is going to go to trial as far as the Supreme Court of Georgia is concerned.
It's not going to be in a federal jurisdiction. It's going to be under Georgia's jurisdiction. Another win for Fannie Willis.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
I love Fannie, and I love her track record so far.
I think all these cases are eventually going to end up in the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's interestingly enough, because Jack Smith, the special prosecutor dealing with the January 6th matters, he basically decided to ask the U.S. Supreme Court to fast track Donald Trump's request about hearing about his immunity from prosecution. Same thing that Mark Meadows was trying in Georgia. Trump is trying to do it in the federal prosecution case in Washington, D.C. And so Jack Smith said to the Supreme Court, would you fast track this, please? So this man doesn't drag this out into the election season. We would like to get this done expeditiously. I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, the U.S. Supreme Court did say, they haven't said whether but they did say that they would probably hear the request for a fast track. Whether they rule on the fast track or not is another issue, but they did say, well, we'll find out whether we'll rule on your fast track. which is interesting because that delay tactic that he is always trying to use may not stand him in good stead this time, because if the Supreme Court was trying to fast track a number of things pertaining to abortion and other things, they can fast track this insurrection immunity case, I would think. That's not to say they will, but the bottom line is, though, this stuff, as Alan said, is going to probably end up at some point in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, which brings us to the question of how impartial can this U.S. Supreme Court be when it comes to people from the far right, since they've got this 6-3 quote conservative. I say that because they're not really conservative, as Alan keeps reminding us, majority on the U.S. Supreme Court. And along those lines, 2 Democratic members of Congress wrote a letter to the Chief Justice and Clarence Thomas, strongly requesting that Clarence Thomas recuse himself from any of those January 6 cases that might show up on their doorstep for adjudication. Comment on that, Alan, on the significance of one, their request for recusal. What does that mean vis-a-vis their new code of conduct? Talk to us.
There's been a lot of discussion about that the Supreme Court has undermined itself through its behavior, because a number of the justices have been implicated in taking gifts from wealthy political donors who have had issues before the court. And one of the people who were most compromised was Justice Clarence Thomas. Now, in this particular case, Clarence Thomas's wife was actively involved in the January 6th insurrection, though she was not charged. So the argument is that because his wife was involved, he should not be sitting on the cases. So that's one issue. The other issue is the court has a lot of leeway in how to approach this. The court can make sweeping decisions, or it can make really narrow decisions. Now, a sweeping decision is, okay, throw it out, Trump is okay. Or it could say, unlikely, oh, Trump did it and he should go on trial. But a like possibility is the court will not make a sweeping decision, but will rule, like the lower court did in Colorado, that it's not clear that Trump was covered under this amendment. So there's a lot of different possibilities, but even if Clarence Thomas withdraws from the case, the right wing on the court still has a 5-3 majority that includes 3 Trump appointees. You could argue that all 3 Trump appointees should have to be reclused from the case, which is not going to happen.
Yeah, right. Which speaks to the whole issue of the ethics code that they supposedly all signed on to that has no enforcement provision whatsoever. Politico just came out with a new revelation about the fact that Clarence Thomas started getting all these largesse, all these gifts and perks from all these right-wing Republican donors when he complained about being poor and not making enough money. And so he and one of the other justices who lean towards the right may be resigning from the court. And lo and behold, all of a sudden, all these perks started being lavished upon him and all these whatever, because this particular Republican congressman that he complained to wanted to make sure that he and Scalia were still on that court so they could, quote, properly interpret the Constitution. I guess the way this particular congressman felt the Constitution should be interpreted. So they keep coming out with these new revelations about Clarence Thomas's connections to these large right-wing Republican donors. And it just makes the court look even worse and worse.
And as I believe, Alan, that Ginny Thomas has maintained that she did not contact her husband. She didn't talk to him about what she texted to Mark Meadows and I guess whatever other conversations she had January 6th. which is something I just don't believe.
Yeah, we can't be responsible for any marriage counseling that they may require.
Pertaining to January 6th, there was another revelation about the fact that those people that sponsored the rally, the Trump rally, the infamous Trump rally, they actually lied to the National Park Service about so they could get their permit. Yeah.
Absolutely did. If I can read a quote now, some of the findings were released to the public. I specifically one from what's her name, Kylie Kramer, who was the leader of the organizer of the January 6th rally.
The organization
that ran this. This is a text between her and Mike Lindell, the Mike Pello guy, who was an avid Trump supporter. Anyhow, quote, she's saying, this text stays between us. We are having a second stage at the Supreme Court again after the ellipse. POTUS is going to have us march there and the Capitol. Kramer wrote to Lindell, it cannot get out about it cannot get out about the march because I will be in trouble with the National Park Service and all the agencies, but the POTUS is going to just call it unexpectedly. And she goes on to say, if anyone tells you otherwise, it's not accurate info. Only myself and an unnamed White House aide know full story of what is actually happening. And we are having to appease many people by saying certain things, having to appease certain people by saying certain things. So they knew what was going to happen.
They were planning the march ahead of time. It wasn't a spontaneous march.
Yep.
And so the Park Service came out and says, yes, looks like they lied to us, doesn't it?
Now, who's this POTUS guy?
Had they have known the full extent.
Yeah, it changed how they were planning for it, security planning, the whole bit. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And this POTUS guy is, what, does he have a name?
No.
Yeah, the POTUS, well, POTUS is, that POTUS at that time was the Orange Julius guy.
Right.
The White House liaison involved in this was not named.
Yeah, I wonder who that White House liaison was.
I can't imagine. I wonder if his initials are on a certain favorite.
Well, there was a guy by the name of Mark Meadows whose name came up with the missing binder. You remember that other story that broke about the fact that that crucial national security binder that has all kinds of
involving
top secret stuff about planning for all kinds of Ukraine methods and sources and all. It's all in this one binder, and that binder has gone missing. And that's part of Jack Smith's investigation. The latest back and forth between people who were testifying, part of the investigation was the last person they thought they saw with that binder was not only the Mark Meadows. It may have been Trump, but it may have been Mark Meadows. And Mark Meadows' people had a non-denial, well, we always handle classified materials with the utmost of rigor, et cetera, et cetera. I'm paraphrasing, by the way. But they didn't say, no, we ain't seen the binder. They just said, we have handled all these classified things with the utmost rigor and in strict protocol, blah, 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 blah. Non-denial of denial, who knows? It may have been Mark Meadows with that binder. It may have been Mark Meadows with the White House liaison. We're not saying, folks, because we don't know either.
The binder was submitted for reasons to declassify or classify material within it, correct? That was the original reason for presenting the binder. So it would have had to have gone to the president.
Oh, we're not saying he didn't have it. That's the charge. He had it and has misplaced it. Right. And the question is, how has he misplaced it? By putting it in the hands of one of his assistants or what? But the binder is missing. And that's part of Jack Smith's investigation on the handling of classified documents by this man. I hesitate to call him anything than whatever, but by this man is as best as I can give him right now. Okay. In any event, I think that's enough of him. It's taken up enough time of our show, but these are stories that we need to talk about and how the press is handling them or not handling it. But in any event, we at least will try to shed some light on all this stuff for our viewers, that this stuff is still swirling around you folks. And it all goes back to this guy refusing a peaceful transition to the incoming duly elected president. And so we're stuck with all this crazy mess. Speaking of crazy mess, how about the crazy mess that these states are doing, wrecking women's lives and causing them all kinds of pain, trauma, psychological, whatever. The Texas case has gotten a lot of publicity about the woman who emergency room gazillion times, all kinds of fetal problems, etc., qualified for what her doctor thought was the Texas abortion law exemption. And of course, the crazy, well, the supposed upright attorney general for the state of Texas by the name of Ken Paxton, who was himself charged with all kinds of crimes and misdemeanors and managed to skate. He decided, no, she couldn't have that abortion. So he got some injunction to stop her doctor's exemption ruling. And so they sued the state, but with time running out, the woman had to flee the state of Texas so that she could take care of her own health, because her health was in jeopardy if she had the baby. And so that suit is still going to run to fruition because her lawyer and herself says, we can't let another woman have to go through this kind of horror and trauma because of these men in the Texas state legislature and an attorney general who refuses to let doctors and experts do what's right by women. But
Now,
Ohio, go ahead, Bob.
now, Eric, as I understand it, the judge initially said it was okay, given what the doctor had said, given what the outlook for the fetus was. The doctor said, the judge had said, yes, this qualifies for the exemption. You can go ahead. And then now, to me, this is about as mean as you can get as a human and a politician. Mr. Paxton, the attorney general, said, no, I'm going to block you. He knows every single fact about the chance of the child living and the possibility for damage to the woman's health. But he said, no, you're not doing it here. I mean, to me personally, as a human being, that's as mean as you can get. So yeah, now she has to leave the state to basically take care of what needs to be done, period. It's not a convenience thing. It needs to be done, but through his political standing and whatever. I'm sorry, Eric, it's as mean as I've ever heard a person get.
Horrendous. I'm glad you shed a light on how horrendous it is, because he's causing her physical strain, causing her to risk her life, causing her all kinds of mental anguish on needlessly. Okay. I didn't call up the story on the Ohio case, but a woman in Ohio, another similar crazy abortion law, she miscarried, even though she'd gone to the hospital, tried to get care and attention for a difficult pregnancy or whatever. They sent her home, they didn't, whatever. She ended up miscarrying at home, and the baby came out stillborn. It happened in her bathroom, and baby's in the toilet. They went and broke open the toilet to find the fetus, the aborted child. And then they charged her with what, Alan? They charged her
a 5th-degree felony, punishable up to a year in prison. They accused her of abuse of a corpse. Now, what's scary here, Ohio permits abortions up to 22 weeks. Brittany Watts goes to the hospital. It's 21 weeks, 5 days, and she's bleeding heavily. They realize that while there's still a heartbeat, the baby is going to come out stillborn. But they make her wait 2 days because there's still a heartbeat. It's now past the 22 week limit, and they send her home bleeding with a non-viable fetus inside her body because they were scared that the doctors were, and the hospital were scared that they would be brought up on charges of violating a late-term abortion law.
Yep.
I tell you, these people, we're back in the Middle Ages now. These people have lost their minds and they're busy trying to police women's bodies, women's health. And it's usually a bunch of men acting because of some hard, I don't know what ideological religious thing they're motivated by.
It's not religion, it's politics, man. It's not, you know.
This is beyond politics. This is craziness.
It's beyond religion.
Yeah, right. Okay, whatever it is, it's craziness. And these women are all suffering as a result. And something is gonna break in this country because women are not gonna be able to survive like this. And I don't think they're gonna tolerate this for much longer. Something's going to really happen in this country if they keep doing this to women and their bodies.
Now, Brittany Watt is Black, and in Ohio, Black women are 10 times as likely as white women who come in with pregnant to be reported to child services.
Yeah, we've seen all the latest statistics about fetal mortality and maternal mortality in childbirth, and the numbers are skyrocketing above normal levels for Black women as compared to white women.
Women are afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid they'll somehow get reported.
So it's all built in racially driven stuff, but it's women's health and their lives at stake. And so I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly not what they're doing in Ohio and Texas. That's for damn sure. But I don't know. We'll be 2/3 of the way through. What's our other big stories? Coverage of. Interestingly enough, I want to backtrack a little bit because there was an interesting exchange that one of CNN's reporters, what's her name, Abby Phillips, one of CNN's premier anchor in the evening. She was having an exchange with Maliotakis, the Staten Island Republican person in the House from New York. And part of the interview was to deal with Trump and his tripling down, not doubling down, tripling down, because every appearance now he keeps using, they're poisoning the blood of the country. These immigrants are vermin, poisoning the blood of our society, blah, 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 blah. And so Phillips' exchange was, well, are you people in the Republican Party happy with this kind of language that harks back to Adolf Hitler and all this fascist language that's precursor to autocratic bad things? He is calling immigrants vermin. He's saying they're poisoning the blood. Maliotakis' response was, no, he's talking about democratic policy. Democratic policy. And Abby Phillips said, he's talking about people. He said the immigrants are people. Maliotakis, no, it's the democratic policy. He said, you're trying to make believe he's saying what you want him to say. You're interpreting what he's saying to fit what you want to hear. This is what he said. This is Abby Phillips pushing back at Maliotakis, saying, this man said this. Why are you calling it that? And Maliotakis refused to acknowledge exactly what he said. And this one anchor would not let her skate on that. And so it's beginning to look as if these mainstream press people are finally trying to hold these people accountable, to get them to hold Trump accountable for his language and what his language does to a democracy, or the intent of maintaining a democracy. I don't know what you guys have been seeing lately, but what's your take on how well the press is dealing with making this guy account?
Okay, just to be clear, since she is a great reporter, it's Abby Phillip, singular.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Just to be clear, but we have about 2 minutes and 45 seconds left.
See, the
But-
problem, again, is people believe what they want to believe. I mean, the Trump statements could have been written at Adolf Hitler and Goebbels at a World War II, at the Nazi ascendancy. But, you know, people dismiss it, it's Trump being Trump. It's just, rhetoric. But again, or they laugh and it's a joke, it's not real. But the reality is it's very, very frightening. And unfortunately, it's not just happening here. You see this kind of playbook playing up people's fears of the other, going across Europe and Argentina. And it's very scary what's happening in the world.
Okay.
Eric, you had wanted to touch on the journalists who were killed in the Israeli-Gaza war.
We don't have time for it because we'd have to get into it. I mean, 64 journalists have been killed, right? And there were a couple more killed recently. And one actually, a guy working for the Emirates said he knew, his suspicion was he was deliberately targeted by an Israeli IDF sniper from across the street. And so we need to dig into that story for real, just to examine how many of these journalists have been killed, predominantly Palestinian journalists or Middle Eastern journalists working for outfits like Al Jazeera or Emirates TV. We'll be hearing more about the story if more American journalists were being slaughtered over there. We'd be hearing a lot more about that story. So let's dig into that on our next show. Unfortunately, we're going to try to tag the show with the Boston mayor apologizing for the guy. Bob?
Right. Well, the Boston mayor apologized today for a 1989 case where a white man basically killed his wife and blamed it on two black carjackers. And the police actually arrested two black men, never charged in this case. But it finally came out that the guy was lying, and he eventually committed suicide. It's a case that's similar.
They knew he was the guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's similar to our. It has. It sounds like our Central Park case, and with that we have about 20 seconds.
Yeah,
Okay,
HBO
well.
did a follow-up in the Boston Globe. That's why it's in the press now.
I
They
see.
uncovered the details.
All right. With that, folks, that's at least one positive note. This has been Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on Media Watch EVT on YouTube.
And we'll catch you the next time, folks. Stay safe.